Hey, we're live. Hey, everybody. We're here with Horror in Your Hands, the rise of horror in video games. How you guys doing?
Good.
Pretty horrific.
Let's quickly sound off about where we are in the world, and then we'll sound off about who we are. But where is everybody right now? Just so I know.
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta? Okay.
Victoria, BC, Canada.
Okay.
Yep.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, East Coast.
And I'm in Central Florida. So we're a lot of East Coast guys.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do quick introductions about who we are and kind of what we do. That way our audience knows. I got Twitch chat open as well, so I can kind of keep an eye on that periodically throughout this. I don't know if I should call it a panel. This is like the weirdest fucking thing. Can I swear?
You can now, apparently.
Okay.
They told me I could earlier, so
I mean, it feels like a podcast, but I think it's a panel, so we're gonna call it a panel. Panel cast. I don't know what the hell to call it. So Eddie, let's start with you about who you are and kind of what you do.
My name is Eddy Webb. I'm a full-time freelancer, both narrative designer and tabletop RPG designer. I've been working for myself full-time for about 5 years now, but before that, I was a content designer on the late lamented World Darkness MMO.
Awesome. Jacob?
Hi, my name is Jacob Burgess. I am the community manager and director of operations for a video game publisher named Yesbert Games. We publish World of Horror. We are giving away raffling off 2 World of Horror keys during this. Cheap plug, cheap pop. I am also a voice actor and a freelance writer, narrative designer. I've worked on Vampire the Masquerade and Wraith and Exalted and a bunch of other stuff. And most recently, video game Dark Dreams of Furii, which is a premium module that just came out for Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition.
Wow.
And a bunch of other shit.
It's a lot of hats, man.
Don't be me, kids.
Have a life, kids.
Why do one thing when you can do all things, right? You make the rest of us look bad. Nick, what about yourself?
Well, that's hard to follow. My name is Nick Francia. I am a content designer for Rogue Robot Studios. I'm also a visual effects artist as well as working in as a VFX supervisor freelance. So a lot of films, mostly horror films. That's what bogs up the indie scene a lot. So
Awesome.
Is this a horror thing? Or read that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Fuck, I'm in the wrong spot.
I think this is supposed to be a horrible panel. That's
No
we're aiming for a horrible panel.
Got you covered.
My name's Ash. I'm a community manager for a bunch of different games. I worked on Titanfall Assault and D&D, Sword Coast Legends, and Hades Star and Dominations, and a handful of other games. I'm also a podcaster. I've been doing a podcast about games and movies and stuff for almost 10 years now, which is way too long to do a podcast. But it's way too long. I've aged quite a bit since I started doing that one. But I love.
Oh God.
I know I can't even. It's like 10 years. Like, go back and listen to the first one. We're like talking about Atari shit. So I love horror games. I think that's why I've been asked to be here, and it's sort of one of the genres I absolutely have fallen in love with over the years. I rushed out when Resident Evil 2 came out the first time and got an Umbrella logo on my body because I was like, it can't get any better than this, So I'm a huge horror guy, and I love that I was asked to be here and chat with you guys because you guys have done some fantastic stuff. So let's get started and kind of go in the way back machine, and let's talk about growing up. So this panel is sort of about the evolution of horror, but it's also about you guys and the things that you love, and we'll take some questions and such from the audience as we progress. But growing up, what was some of the first horror games that you remember playing that impacted you? Anyone can jump in.
Parasite Eve.
Oh yeah, Parasite Eve.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Holy shit. I'm not huge on jump scares.
Yeah.
My flavor of horror is creepy, macabre, like just kind of get in you and live there kind of thing. Not the type of horror that just makes people want to poop. Which nothing wrong with that. Just not that's not the flavor I savor. But Parasite Eve was one of the things that like really, really stuck with me with the themes and the pervasiveness of weirdly enough, this horrible thing that was like kind of spreading through New York City and it taking over, and then in true Japanese fashion, you had to fight a baby at the end.
Because
There's
like,
a lot of that.
Yeah. Oh man, they're terrified of babies. It was just it's one of the things that really, really fucking stuck the landing for me and kind of set me on this path.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic title, and like you're right. I mean, there's definitely different. I saw someone in chat say jump scares are blah, but I vividly remember being relatively young and playing the first Resident Evil on PS1, and the first when the dogs jump through the window, it's like the very famous scene that like scared the shit out of everybody when they were kids. You know, that
Not
scene,
as far as I got.
Yeah, I mean that scene, and people in chat can probably attest to this, but it was the first time that I realized as a gamer that holy cow, like this is going to be an entirely new genre of video game where it actually can bring true horror and true terror. Not to say that there hadn't been. I want to say, maybe chat can correct me, but I want to say that was like 95-ish, maybe 94-ish. I might be wrong, but right around that time was when I first started realizing that video games can be truly horrific. What about the rest of you guys? Do you have any early memories of early titles that really stuck with you?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say the first like game I could call a horror game that I played was Silent Hill back on PS1. Obviously a classic, but funny enough, the first time I've ever felt scared playing a video game was playing the Shadow Temple and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which was to me as a kid terrifying, from the Red Dead screaming at you and like jumping on you to the whole atmosphere. Like, bear in mind, I was like 8-7 years old playing this, and yeah, definitely poop inducing as stated before.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody remember Splatterhouse?
Actually, I don't. No.
Splatterhouse, I think it was a TurboGrafx 16 or something, probably like early 90s, maybe late 80s, but it was just like not really horrific, but it had like a lot of horror elements. You played like this masked guy just hacking the shit out of everything, and I remember there was a lot of controversy with that game when it first came out. I think they tried to
was that
redo
an FMV game?
It wasn't FMV. We could get into FMV stuff if you guys
want
to.
We should.
I mean, if you're touching on Resident Evil.
Yeah, right. That's true.
But I know for me, there's kind of two lanes. Like there's, if you want like just monster gothic Castlevania, you can't really overstate Castlevania. It didn't really scare me so much. It was creepy. But the first horror game that really got me like nervous to play was I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It was an adventure game based off the story. Harlan Ellison actually wrote some of the script for that game, and you're watching people go mad while playing it. It's genuinely disturbing.
Oh wow!
And it was like 90s era adventure game.
Yeah, I actually had not even heard of that title, and that's the interesting thing is there's going to be a lot that you guys probably bring up that I haven't played myself, and our viewers can probably chime in too and talk about some titles that we may not be aware of. There's a ton out there.
I had forgotten about that until he mentioned it, and now I can't not think about it.
Yeah, the machine.
Yeah, I know, right? AI. Like, yeah, I mean, and it was just so. For people who don't play it, it's kind of like an anthology game. You're playing a short, kind of a 2-hour adventure game from different character perspective, and they all kind of coalesce the end. And like, there's a puzzle you have to solve by murdering somebody. Like, that's how you progress in the game. It's that disturbing.
Wow.
Yeah, don't like, if you're gonna Google it in chat, like, tighten your butthole first. Like,
I think it's on GOG.com. It's like super cheap or something.
Oh wow, yeah. Bert Neal in chat says, "I have no mouth and I want to scream" is still incredibly frightening. It's the kind of horror that lingers in the mind.
Yep.
There was kind of like
scary stuff.
There was kind of like an age when that like games came out that like there was like almost that like super visceral and really fucked up kind of like horror games. Because like you said, I have no mouth, and I mean it was like, oh my god, what about like Phantasmagoria? And like,
oh yeah,
damn. I'm not gonna sleep.
But even like, like minor horror games, like even Seventh Guest had some horror elements to it. I mean, again, it's going into the FMV era, but I mean,
right. I miss FMV stuff. Actually, when I just started up Resident Evil 3, the new Resident Evil 3, and I was really delighted to see an FMV sequence at the beginning of that game for like a good like 2 or 3 minutes. I was like, oh, they're using like full motion video and like actual actors playing reporters in Raccoon City. And I'm like, this is fantastic. I kind of miss this. And I know it's had a little bit of a resurgence in recent years. And I mean, let's be honest, it was really awful in the 90s, you know, like Command and Conquer, and like it was just really bad. But I think we've gotten to the age where it can be fantastic again if utilized correctly. And I think Resident Evil 3, the new one that just dropped, did a really great job because it's only for a few minutes and then it brings you, you know, straight into the action. But
I'm watching the Red Alert 2 trailer right after we're done with this.
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
It's
so bad. Actually, if you want to get into modern FMV that's really kind of psychologically horrible, Her Story is a fantastic example of that. Because Her Story is nothing but video clips, but it's about a woman, you're interrogating a woman about her allegedly killing somebody.
Oh, I heard this is really great. Didn't she? Yeah. I believe the actress won a bunch of awards for this too, because she did such a great job. It's been on my pile of shame to play for a long time.
Yuppie Psycho does a lot of really good stuff with this too.
Okay.
Yeah, Yuppie Psycho was great. Yeah, and like a lot of the you can find VHS tapes and like play them on the VHS player, and they're live movies, and they are.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
I was just thinking about that because Control from last year, all their video, like in-game videos that you find are all FMVs, they're all live action, like live action.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've gotten to an age where they're finally starting to find ways to incorporate FMV that doesn't really take you out of the experience too much. Even like Borderlands has used it for years, and just mainly in video clips and stuff that you find and pick up. So it's good stuff. A lot of you guys are writers, and I was curious a little bit about your process and how you think what makes great horror writing in games. I know that's a really broad question, so I apologize, but what is your process and what makes horror writing good writing in video games?
I talked first last time. Somebody else should go.
Okay. I mean, for me, a lot of times it's you have to know what your technical limitations are from the video game perspective, because like if I'm trying to work on a heavy, like say splatterpunk script that's not going to have visuals to go along with that, then that horror is not going to land. I found writing horror is a lot like writing comedy in video games, is that you really have to understand what the design of the game is going to be, and then make sure you take the maximum benefit from that. So like that's why I feel some games that, you know, like there are some great games out there, just basically you find a cell phone and you explore all the stuff in a cell phone. That's really creepy because the writers really understood the limitations of trying to get an experience across on a cell phone style screen. Whereas if something like Control, it's like, okay, now we have AAA budgets and we can do you know, cutscenes and FMV and all that. It's like, cool, you can write 8 different styles to that. So once you know exactly what the design is as early as possible, this is not a genre where you can come in halfway through design and go, okay, cool, write a story for us. You just can't do it that way for horror games.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, I think something to kind of keep in mind is that one of the biggest falls that I feel like a lot of horror games like fall into, that when they try to make it, is they try to give you this heavy storytelling, or like I'm trying to think of the word. It's kind of hanging on my tongue. Heavy exposition, just constantly throughout. And I think some of the best horror games we've seen have the idea that you can sprinkle a little bit and then guide the players almost like on this treasure hunt. And there's more satisfaction in connecting those little dots or little like treasures together than there is kind of being forced to being read this novel. I mean, one of the biggest things for, say, like Resident Evil 2, what the remake did, which was that people liked over the previous games, whether it be 6 or 5, a lot of people weren't fans of that, was the fact that Resident Evil 2 at its base was still very simple, compared to these overblown action scripts that had somehow polluted the game. Or even like the original Silent Hill, you were just a guy tracking down his lost daughter, and like, yeah, there was a cult, but you kind of got whispers of it, and like if you really weren't looking, you would miss a lot of it until the end. And it's just kind of like, it was more about the exploration of that story rather than just spoon feed. Here you go, take it, and just digest it hell out.
Yeah. So to build off what Eddie and Nick said, is knowing what your limitations are is going to give you the tools that you need to write something really creepy, because it's tough. It's that kind of like spoiled for choice. You can write anything. Here's a bunch of money. Write horror.
Right.
There's a ghost, and it's ooh, it's really like it's hard to do. So knowing what the parameters are and then writing to that, like the technical limitations and the limitations of the setting that you're writing in, taking a holistic, knowing what your holistic parameters are and then writing within that, and not just filling the whole thing in, because giving the player enough agency to fuck themselves, essentially. Like, I don't want to open that door, and you kind of have to open that door. Yeah, but I don't want to open that door. You want to play the game? I do want to play the game. Open the door. Fuck. Like that kind of thing. Like, I mean, either, you know, it doesn't have to physically be a door, obviously, but to allow enough space within the parameters that you've set to allow the player to either have to make the choice that they don't want to make, or give them the option to not make that choice, but it won't be as satisfying.
And I think to build that, Jacob gives a good point. Is we're talking about limitations, we're also talking about genre conventions too, to a certain degree. Like the horror of Doku Doku Literature Club is very different, but a lot of that stems from the fact that it's building off of a dating simulator and dating simulator assumptions. Horror has to transgress assumptions to work, and so well, you can transgress, you know, social conventions, but also if you transgress genre conventions from a design perspective, that can also help the horror land really hard. And if you have not played Doku Doku Literature Club, I can't tell you anything more than just please play it. Because it is genuinely creepy.
I think you guys really hit the nail on the head. I think there's something, the titles that to me always feel the most terrifying are the ones that are sort of beautiful in their simplicity, that aren't overly dense. They are, you know, terrifying for their own particular reasons and not because of this, you know, big, thick, bloated concept behind them. Like I remember playing through, and this is not considered a horror title, but have you guys played through Gone Home before you knew what Gone Home was?
Oh yeah.
So the first time I played Gone Home, I remember sitting there in my chair with all the hair on my arms and legs standing up because I swore to God that something was going to jump out at me at any moment. And I remember just being like absolutely mortified that at any moment there's going to be a jump scare or I was going to see something. And I mean, spoiler alert for anyone that's watching, nothing ever comes. It's all about exploration and discovering this story. So I felt that was brilliant. I felt like it was designed to kind of make you uneasy because it kind of looked like it was going to be a horror title, but it didn't end up being a horror title, which is what made it so fantastic.
What, with the purple silhouette, like house and everything? No.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. It was great. What for you guys in recent years? What have some of the standout titles? What are you know, sort of the standouts been that you guys think that our people in chat should keep an eye out for? That's a hard question. I know.
One that I know, I almost guarantee no one's gonna know about. I mean, it's Lord of Horror, obviously, but but one that most people don't talk about and they really should talk about more: Spec Ops: The Line.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Those reactions right there are exactly why.
See, I haven't played
it. Spec Ops: The Line starts off like generic military shooter, and it becomes the novel The Heart of Darkness. And it does it in a way that you don't even realize until you're too deep in what's going on. It's genuinely good.
It's a game that is so good that nobody wants to talk about it,
right?
Except to just go, fucking do
it.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
Yeah. The only thing I can say on that is Napalm, Agent Orange. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'll keep my eye out for. I have not touched that one. Anybody else have any standouts in recent years?
There is one game. I feel like I'm getting a lot of flack for it, but I think it's a really good game in showing how you can take how you can make a really good sequel to a horror game and learning from your mistakes, which is, and I always recommend this, Evil Within 2. I don't know if you've ever played the original Evil Within. It was sort of a mediocre game. It was made by the developer that made Resident Evil 4. So obviously a very impressive game, was people regarded as a Resident Evil that changed the entire series from there on. People played Evil Within. It was decent, but it wasn't Resident Evil 4, which I understand and I can agree with. And then I get Evil Within 2, and I remember I played Evil Within 1 maybe a month before the sequel came out, and I said, you know what, I need a good horror game. Let me try this. And immediately I was blown away because every criticism I had with the original game got fixed in the sequel, whether it was about making the story more tied to the protagonist and making me actually give a shit. That was good. From the controls tightening up to using, and I know a lot of games will use this now, to using the controller, because I believe it's PS4 exclusive, but like there's the speaker built into the PlayStation 4 controller, to the fact that you would hear lullabies from this one enemy that was essentially like a one-hit kill enemy, and you wouldn't be able to hear them on the screen at all while you were playing the game. You had to actually sit there in the total dark, and when it lit up a different color and you start hearing the lullabies, you're like, all right, it's nearby. And just so many experiences I've had with that game over playing it.
That's really fantastic. I love to hear about innovation like that. I remember playing, you guys play through Dead Space 3?
No.
I played
So
one.
yeah, a lot of people skipped it. It didn't get the best reviews because a lot of it didn't take place in space. You like land on a planet and stuff. But the thing that Dead Space 3 had, and chime in if you in chat if you played through this, it had a multiplayer component that was really pretty brilliant because the players could actually see, like one player had was some sort of mental illness or was possessed or something to that nature, and they were able to see things that player one could not see. So player two, if you're playing together, player two would be like, man, there's something like 3 feet in front of you, and player one would be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, and be like, no, there's like a floating baby just flew by your head, and player one would be like, buddy, there's no floating baby. Like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and then
cool.
for player two, the lights in the room would go out and there'd be like blood splatters on the wall, and player two would be like freaking out, and player one would be like, the room looks fine, buddy, like I don't know what's going on. So definitely check out Dead Space 3 and play through with one of your best buddies. It was really innovative and really, really fun, and actually genuinely scary. Not as scary as I think the first couple games, but for a multiplayer experience, it was pretty genius.
That's the coolest thing I've heard about as a mechanic that no sir, not for me.
Yeah, no, it was really good.
Cool.
It was really good.
That sounds really cool, and I will not be doing it. Thank you.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. No, thank you. Damn. So here's the cheap plug. World of Horror is really good. It's in early access right now. Hey.
Yeah.
But for
tell us about it. Tell us about it, and tell because I want to hear the pitch, and I want to check it out for sure. So tell our viewers and stuff a little bit.
So World of Horror is a first-person horror RPG. It's a roguelite. The best way that I can describe it, the way that I describe it to folks at conventions, and when people ask me like, so what the fuck is it about, instead of just going, horror. It's like Junji Ito and the Cthulhu mythos had weird tentacle sex, had a baby, and then that baby crawled out of the ocean to attack a Japanese fishing village in the 1980s. And you have to survive it. All of the art was made in MS Paint by one gentleman named Poznance, who lives in Poland and is a dental technician and is amazing. It's a really, really good game. I had to go through the whole play testing. It's so good, it's criminal, which is probably why you hear the police. It's I had to play test it, and I write horror and I engage with the type of horror that I like, and this is the type of horror that I like, and it is creepy as hell. If you want to get like a little preview of it, we did on the Yizrid Games channel, and you can find it on our YouTube page. We did an early access because we released it in early access, but I was like, I have this game a week beforehand. Who do I need to ask to play this early? Oh, that's right, me. Jacob, can we play this early? Yes, Jacob, we can play this early. So we played it early. And yeah, so if you want, I mean, But it is very good. One playthrough is about, like, if you play it slow, it's about 3 hours, because every choice has consequence. Like,
Okay.
and there's random events. There's different old gods every playthrough. The game is constantly being worked on right now by the developer. It's a creepy ass fucking experience, and it will mess up your life for a little bit.
Is it being developed by one guy, or did just
Yes.
Wow.
Team of Uno. Yep.
Hats off to
Wow.
him. I
Yeah,
hope
he's
it blows
insane.
up so he can quit his staring into the mouth holes job.
I don't know that he would. Thanks,
Yeah.
Eddie. Thanks,
Yeah.
man. Thank you so
You wonder
much.
where he gets the inspiration for all his horror writing. It's just like, I stare into mouth holes all day
all the
long.
time. Yep.
So for context of those at home, before the stream started, we were talking about the funny fact, dental assistants or dental hygienists are rated among the most common people to go crazy while doing their profession. I think they're actually above postal workers.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, mouth holes. That's
That's
Going
it.
hygienic.
Yeah, it's probably make you lose your mind after a while.
It's no good. But my personal favorite is Control.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's on, again, my pile of shame. It's like actually after Resident Evil 3, which I just started like yesterday, Control is next on the list, because I've heard nothing but fantastic stuff about Control. So
I cannot recommend it enough.
I can't wait. I can't wait to play.
That game fills a really niche genre that I like, which is characters narrating their actions to themselves. And I can't explain why I like it, but I just do. And Control does it a lot. And it's
that company does a lot of that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Alan Wake.
I haven't gotten to play it yet, though. I
really?
did. So yeah, it's not on the PlayStation. That's what I have.
Or Max Payne, you know.
Yeah. Oh no, I've played Max Payne. That was yeah. The thing I remember from Max Payne the most is one dude pronouncing Cthulhu Cthulhu.
Okay. You love when that happens.
Yep.
Let's shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to force you guys to search your memory banks. So this is another difficult question. Horror enemies and villains. What are some of your standouts over the years, and what do you think made them so iconic? I mean, there's the obvious, like you had Nemesis up earlier.
Yeah.
I remember being a young guy first seeing Nemesis and being like, what's his story? And then I realized he doesn't fucking have one. Well, maybe I haven't played through the new 3 yet, so maybe he has a story now, but I always was keeping my fingers crossed that Nemesis would, have some really cool backstory, but I didn't think he had one. So when I'll morph this question a little bit too. When you guys are writing your enemies and your villains, and and also ones that you've encountered during your time as players, what are some of the things that you look for, or some of the things that were standouts for you playing? Well, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
That second part, especially. Dude. Yeah.
That was really good.
Like, I have an answer, but I just like watching Jacob flounder.
Damn it,
Eddie. We're very professional.
We are.
All right, fine. You had an answer. I'm gonna go first.
Okay.
Fuck yourself. I was trying to be polite. So for me, when I'm putting together a villain, one of the most, it really, again, it depends on the constraint and everything like that. I work and really enjoy working with limitations. I love it when somebody goes like, here's 3 things. I need it to fit together. I don't goddamn know how. The way that I describe it is narrative designers and writers are master jello makers. Like, we're suspending all of the stuff that you want in the game within the context of a story. So it really depends on, excuse me. It really depends on, I just thought about mouth holes. It really depends on what you want. But one of the things that I like to go for, one of the flavors that I like is, I almost always, because I have a double theater degree and my head is way far up my own ass. I always start with motivation. Is why are they doing the thing? Because with somebody like Nemesis, even if the player even if nobody sees what the backstory is, I know what it is and can write from that place of foundation. why are they doing the thing that they are doing? And because that will kind of bleed through and kind of you'll be able to feel it as this sort of background radiation, and it will feel real and whole. And sometimes not knowing what that thing is, but knowing that there is a reason is yet another level of fuck.
I mean, that's a really great point. Even if the audience is never told the backstory of a particular villain or a particular enemy type, as long as the writer has a clear image of the motivation for that, for that enemy, for that unit, I think they can really, make it a much more well-rounded and kind of diabolical enemy just through their writing.
I think so.
Yeah.
Anybody
else have any standouts? Good.
I would also say that even like going off of Jacob's point more, like the simplest motivations are often the best. In fact, sometimes you can get away with, no motivations. You could even argue. I mean, look back to, Nemesis, his simple motivation is kill stars. That's it. It's just when you keep those motivations simple and you keep them to a base level of need or a base primal instinct, they don't become, messed up humans or characters or monsters. They become forces of nature. And I believe that's sometimes like some of the most terrifying, like villains or monsters that we have, our enemies. I mean, just going to film, just because that's like the biggest thing I pull from, the xenomorph in the original Alien. It is just there. It's there to survive. It's there to hunt. Mike Myers doesn't, the sequels gave him motivation, but he's there just to murder and kill, and he's just this being, this shape.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing more terrifying than that face hugger. I don't care what anybody says. The idea of like, something planting an egg in your guts and then you erupting at the dinner table. It's like, come on, it's the worst thing ever.
Oh no, not again.
Oh yeah.
And it's terrifying to think that like H.R. Geiger, I love Aliens. It's my favorite movie, so I'm about to nerd out.
Aliens is my favorite movie.
Yeah.
Alien
How
or
dare
Aliens?
you nerd out at a horror convention?
like H.R. Geiger like pulled that shit straight from his nightmares. Like he was like, I've been drawing my nightmares, and he shows this like crazy insane art, and they're like, we're gonna make that our antagonist. And it's just from the deepest fears of his mind. It's just, even when I feel like just knowing that makes the xenomorph and the facehugger just 100 times more creepier to think that was born out of someone's mind.
Right.
He dreamed
an actual nightmare, right?
Right. But I think that goes back to a larger point, which is that audiences can detect artifice, right? If you make a villain that is meant to be the creepy villain, audiences are gonna buy that real quick. But like Nick said, it's like the xenomorph comes from this kind of subconscious, and we can all kind of on some level recognize that. Like Jacob says, like even if we don't understand the motivation, knowing that there is something there, I recognize that. So I mean, as long as the audience has the ability to kind of connect with the villain, you don't have to like it, that connection, but the fact that you can kind of go, okay, maybe on a really bad day, I can kind of see your point, really helps to kind of cement that, because it's the understandable, the fact that it's close to you. Sometimes truly alien horror, it has to have that down to earth component, or that connections that people can really kind of gravitate to it. So Cthulhu stories across the board are kind of hit or miss, because like if it's just about the old gods, they can seem very kind of intellectual and abstract. But when we're talking about how they're corrupting your neighbors and your friends and people around you, that's when they become truly kind of horrible and creepy. And I think video games work in the same way. It's like if you have a villain that is always in the background and is always kind of slowly teasing him and bringing him up more and more, even if you don't recognize in the beginning that's the villain, when it comes to the end, you go, okay, I that's been through my entire gameplay. I have a connection to that, even if it's subconscious connection, and I feel stronger about this character when I finally meet it.
Yeah, that's a really good point about, sometimes the most impactful horror is grounded and not massive in scale. And that's something that we talked about earlier as well. It's actually a really good segue. I kind of wanted to talk just briefly about the state of the world, which is obviously why we're doing this panel / convention / whatever podcast, whatever you want to call it, why we're doing it, all remotely now. So with the coronavirus outbreak and everyone globally being impacted, and really it's altering the way we think about the world. How do you think, and this is a strange question, I apologize, how do you think this is going to impact horror, and specifically horror in games, in the coming years? Do you think we're going to see narratives born, and more stories that revolve around pandemics and isolation and germs? I mean, how do you guys think that this is going to change the way that we look at horror?
I feel like we're already there. Disease is scary. Disease is fucking terrifying. But I mean, for the last 20 to 40 years, how many movies about zombies, infections, whether you do Night of the Living Dead, whether you do 28 Days Later, whether you do Cabin Fever, which is the villain in it is a flesh-eating disease, and all the games too, from Left 4 Dead to Days Gone to Resident Evil, disease and pandemic, it's been a constant, fear on humanity's mind, is the whole idea that this virus that you really can't stop. And I think that's honestly probably the biggest reason why we're afraid of it, is that there's not really a way to stop it. It's not an enemy you can shoot at or really board yourself up from. It's a disease. It can be on anyone. It's invisible. It's an unknown threat, but once it's got you, it's kind of hard to get away.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the rest of you guys? Do you think we're going to be seeing more, or do you think it's going to be like sort of a taboo topic once this is all said and done?
So I think people are going to engage with horror more right now, personally, because that's a fear you can control. You choose to engage with that, and it can be cathartic to do so. I do not know. I believe, as far as the topics of contagion and pandemic, in the coming years, I think we're probably going to see a pop of some folks writing about it as for their own catharsis and kind of to get it out there. But as far as what kind of horror people want to engage with, I think folks might be like, yeah, that was that was done. They did. Well, let's find something else to do, I think. Because, nature just did that. So I think that's already done. Let's find something a little more, unique, or go to space or something. Right. I think there's going to be a spike of folks working their shit out, and then a kind of getting away from the sort of contagion and things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we saw a lot of that after the 9/11 attacks. There were like a handful of films about 9/11 and about all the horrible things that happened, and then I can't tell you the last time I saw plane crash movies after that. It was like we just don't want to watch that shit anymore. It's like you said, it was just like, let's get it out of our system and let's move on to something else.
Right. But I was gonna say it's a really good thing. We were on the same page. But the piece of that also is that afterwards it moves to metaphor. Because zombie movies became very popular after that, because it was a sense of anyone could be my enemy, which is the same core fear of terrorism, that anyone could do this horrible thing that is near me, but they just moved it over into zombies, and the zombie films get a huge spike. And I think we'll have something similar where I think, like y'all have said, that we'll have a brief pandemic thing, but then invisible enemies, I think, will become very popular in horror for a while.
So watch out for sleeper cell movies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Absolutely. That kind of stuff I think will big up, because then it gets to the same. It allows us to work our stuff out, as you say, in a different way. Well, not on a subconscious level. On the conscious level, I'm tired of looking at pandemic stuff. I'm over it, and so that'll bounce off people. But like, I still need to work through the idea that what can kill me, I can't even see, and also I can't be near the people that can protect me. I think those kinds of tensions will start to pop up in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great comments coming through in chat now. I'm just going to kind of cruise through a couple of these to share with you guys. One is from, I cannot say the name, the Mina sign. It says, as an anthropologist, I think this is going to be a fascinating time in terms of our culture's artistic response. Every generation's horror media revolves around these deep-seated cultural fears and metaphors. So it'll be interesting to see where our horror goes next. I expect to see a lot of focus on body snatching, paranoia, and distress, which is what you just said, and natural disaster as a horror focus. with horror, but horror in games as well. Like we had The Division just a couple years ago which dealt with this pandemic breakout and sort of the government military response to that break. It wasn't a horror title, but walking through New York in The Division and having it look eerily similar to what New York looks like now, it's very, very strange, and kind of, off-putting in some
Oh yeah,
ways.
there's a couple games that in retrospect are now horror games, like Death Stranding as well. It's like last year, it's like,
Mhm.
oh, Kojima did a horror game about a guy who has to deliver things